We're live. I think we're live. It's exciting. We might just wait until exactly 2 o'clock to get going, but hello to everyone that's here already.
So somewhere that you can see. Oh yeah, there's 30 people.
Hello
And
to all of you.
Online.
Hope you're having a lovely time in the sunshine.
Isn't this a marvellous experience?
Just turn up a tiny bit this way because we're revealing Trevor. Okay, it's 2 o'clock. Hello and welcome to our Earth Live lesson. Today we're coming to you live from sunny Cornwall. I'm Constable and I'm a wildlife filmmaker.
My name's Tom Horton and I'm a PhD student at the University of Exeter. Firstly, we'd like to say a huge thank you to Lizzie Daly for organising these brilliant lessons. There's been some really fantastic Earth Live talks so far.
And now more than ever, it is so important that we all keep connected with each other, but also with nature.
And today, we're going to talk to you about 2 amazing species that you might not necessarily associate with the British Isles.
I'm going to be talking about beavers.
And I'll be talking about bluefin tuna.
But for now, Tom is going to go off and go and greet a very special guest that we've got joining us today. And while he does that, I'm going to give a little bit more information about myself and my work. So I'm a self-shooting wildlife filmmaker, and self-shooting means that I don't have a big crew. When I go out on a film job, I'm generally just totally on my own. And then I also do all of the editing as well. And this is one of my favourite things about my job, is that I get to see a project right through from the very beginning all the way through to the final film at the end. And my work mainly focuses on telling the stories of organisations and individuals that are dedicated to restoring and protecting vulnerable species and habitats. And through my work, I get to meet some incredible people. I also get to learn a huge amount, but I also get some very exciting encounters with wildlife. I film some of the big beasts like elephants and basking sharks, down to some of the much smaller butterflies, flies, and even seagrass. But today, I'm going to be talking to you about filming one of my absolute favourite animals, and that is the amazing beaver. And introducing from the Cornwall Beaver Project, this is Trevor. Trevor is a Eurasian beaver, and I'm going to turn him round a little bit towards the screen so you can see these amazing teeth that Trevor's got. And you might think that they're a little bit orange and that Trevor really needs to maybe do his teeth. But actually, the reason that they're orange is because they've got a very high iron content in their enamel, and this makes them incredibly strong and means that they can gnaw down on bark and also fell trees. And it's with these trees that beavers make the dams that they're famous for. And these dams can transform landscapes. Beavers truly are nature's architects. I travelled to Germany to film Bavarian beavers in 2018, and we were taken to a beaver dam system that was over 150 metres long. That is longer than the size of a full-length football pitch. It's huge. They also have these webbed back feet that you can see here and these very powerful hindquarters, and this makes them really powerful swimmers. They look a little bit clumsy when they're walking around on land, but if you see one in the water, they're actually very graceful. They've also got this kind of leathery, very flat, paddle-like back tail, and they sometimes slap this on the surface of the water and make this incredible splashing sound, which is really amazing to hear. They don't have the best eyesight. You can see that relative to their size, they've actually got very small eyes, but they've got a very keen sense of smell. And if you're ever anywhere where there's an opportunity to see a beaver, you have to keep very quiet, and it's best to be downwind so that they don't smell you. Also, contrary to popular belief, and often confused with otters' diets, these guys don't eat fish, they're vegetarians, and they love nothing better than chomping down on leaves and twigs, and willow is one of their favourites. They also have this incredibly thick, very soft fur, and this is just one of the reasons that beavers have been hunted in the past. Now, you may not know this, but beavers used to be native here in the UK, but they were hunted for their meat, for their fur. Famously, Napoleon Bonaparte's hat was made from felt that was from beaver fur because it's waterproof, but also for their scent sacs. They have these glands that produce this kind of very smelly substance. It's called castoreum, and this has been used as a flavour enhancer in things like soaps and perfumes and even vanilla, and so you could find it in ice cream. But because of these reasons, the beavers were hunted until they totally disappeared from the UK, and that was over 400 years ago. And that was such a long time ago now, that is why people often don't realise that we used to have them here. But now, as the climate is changing and winters here in the UK have been getting wetter and wetter, flooding has started to become a really big problem. And rather than spending vast amounts of money on man-made dams, focus has been turning to our furry friends and their ability to create dams that could potentially help us with reducing flooding. And at the same time, these wetland habitats that they create are brilliant for biodiversity. And because of this, there are now a number of trials across the UK where they're reintroducing beavers to monitor their ability to do this, to help with humans and wildlife, which is amazing. So, where do I come into all of this? Well, Chris Jones, he's a local farmer who lives just down the road from me, and he lives in a farm in a valley that is upstream from a little village called Laddock. And he was chatting to his neighbours from the village, and they were telling him about how they had been flooded for 3 years in a row, causing them loads of problems. And Chris, who was aware of the beaver trials happening across the UK, thought that beavers on his land could potentially be the solution to their flooding problem. So he set about making this happen. He first of all got Cornwall Wildlife Trust on board, but what they really needed in order to run an official trial is a beaver-proof fence, and that is very expensive. And so this is where I got involved. They approached me to produce a fundraising film to generate the funds for the beaver-proof fence. And amazingly, this fundraiser was successful, and in the summer of 2017, I had the incredible job of filming the return of beavers to Cornwall for the first time in 400 years. And this was the most amazing day, not just to see beavers back in a landscape where they once were, but also just to see them whizzing around in the daylight, because they're nocturnal. You often only will see them at night. I also had an amazing encounter with the female. I've got a picture here, and you can see that I was filming, this is the release day. The female bumped right into the base of my tripod. So a really, really close encounter, which is very cool. And from the moment the beavers were released on the site, they got busy building, and they constructed their first dam in just 2 days. They really are busy beavers. And I've been revisiting the site, filming them since the release day, documenting the transformation on the land, and it has been incredible. To date, they've built 8 dams. They've raised the water level throughout the site, making it much more absorbent and less prone to flooding. And water that used to take 15 minutes to flow through the site, it now takes over an hour. And they're also seeing species there that have never been seen before. And even more exciting, in the spring of 2018, the first kits were born, and I was on hand to capture the very first footage of the baby beavers. And this was announced by the incredible Gillian Burke on Spring Watch. But what has been very special about being part of this project is to be part of something that is really giving back and making space for nature, seeing beavers back in a landscape where they belong, where they once were. But this is also a project where I've got the opportunity to observe and film over a really long period of time. And I'll definitely be heading down to the site with my camera and keeping up with the Cornish beavers for years to come as they continue to work away improving the site. And if you would like to meet the Cornish beavers, you can head over to the Cornwall Beaver Project page, where you'll find loads of up-to-date camera trap footage of the parents and the kits working away on the site. This is also the time of year when new kits might be born, so there could be an exciting announcement coming in the next few weeks. But for now, we're going to say goodbye to Trevor and say hi to Tom again.
And is saying goodbye to nature's architects and saying hello to nature's giants. Now, I think it's fair to say that Atlantic bluefin tuna aren't normally associated with the United Kingdom. And if I were to say to you that bluefin tuna were present in our waters between August and December each year, well, I imagine you'd start off by saying, well, what are bluefin tuna? Well, bluefin are the superfish of the ocean. They can grow to length in excess of 3 meters long and weigh as much as 700 kilograms. And if you're wondering about how big that actually is, well, imagine standing on an adult's shoulders and looking down at the floor. Well, you'd be looking down at the end of the bluefin tuna's tail, and the end of its head would be above your head. They are absolutely massive. Now, being superfish, bluefin tuna have several super abilities. And out of the 25,000 different species of bony fish, bluefin are one out of only a small handful that are able to keep themselves warm when the water around them is cool, just like humans. This is called being endothermic. Now, what this means is that bluefin tuna can hang out in colder areas of the ocean where there are lots of smaller fish for them to feed on. But then they can also swim to warmer places to reproduce. Pretty cool. Now, bluefin are also famous for being really fast, and they are. In fact, they need to be in order to catch their favorite food, small, agile, silvery fish. However, a bluefin tuna's average swimming speed is just 2 to 4 miles per hour, which is far more modest. That means it would take a bluefin approximately 6 to 13 hours to swim the length of a marathon, which doesn't seem that fast, especially when you consider that the marathon world record is just over 2 hours. However, the bluefin tuna's next super ability is endurance. And if we compare with humans again, but for endurance running, the world distance record for running non-stop is 350 miles, which took Dean Carnassas nearly 90 hours, which, we hang on for a second and think about that, is bonkers in itself. But if we compare it to a bluefin, it would take about 100 hours to do this. But this is where it gets interesting. At this point, at the end of the marathon, or Dean Carnassas's 350 miles, a bluefin would not tire. In fact, it would continue doing these marathon records back to back to back to back to back. In fact, bluefin never stop swimming, which makes them a true super endurance fish. Now, after hearing a few of these facts, I'm sure you all agree with me that bluefin are a real superfish. Now, about 100 or so years ago, this superfish used to be caught off the Yorkshire coast. In fact, in 1929, there were apparently so many bluefin tuna that commercial fishermen were complaining that the fish were breaking up the herring shoals and causing a nuisance. And in 1930, the British Tunny Club was formed, and then between then and 1954, hundreds of massive bluefin tuna were caught. Just like this. This is a picture of bluefin tuna that were caught with a rod and reel hanging up on a dock in Scarborough. Now, the fish that had been caught and landed at the dock would regularly draw crowds. Just like this, you can see a fish being unloaded from the back of a lorry. And with crowds came status, and aristocrats flocked from all around the world to catch one of the elusive giant tunnies off the Yorkshire coast. Amazingly, and despite the UK not being associated with Atlantic bluefin tuna, we actually held a world record for the species, which is a fish that a gentleman named Edward Peel landed in 1932, which weighed a whopping 362 kilograms. Now, with world records came competition, and this fishery was fiercely competitive, with the wealthy aristocrats regularly arguing over whose fish was bigger, so there's nothing changed there. Now, this is a picture of a man named Lorenzo Mitchell Henry, standing next to a bluefin tuna he caught that weighed a whopping 386 kilograms, which is still a British record. If we take a second just to admire this fish, isn't that an absolute monster? So that's Lorenzo Mitchell Henry standing next to his bluefin tuna, and this is not even the biggest bluefin tuna that's been caught. Absolutely ginormous. Now, famously, another gentleman caught a bigger fish than Lorenzo Mitchell Henry, but it was only bigger by a kilogram. It's 387 kilos. Now, being the sporting person that he was, Lorenzo Mitchell Henry complained that actually the rope they'd used to weigh the other gentleman's fish was wet. So the actual weight was wrong, and in fact, the fish was lighter. And he actually had that fish overturned, which is why his record still stands. Now, all of this excitement off the Yorkshire coast came to an abrupt stop when the giant tunny all but disappeared in about 1954. Now, this was assumed to be due to commercial fishing boats, which had hoovered up all the herring off the coast, which is what bluefin migrated to the area to eat. But it was also a symptom of other fishing boats elsewhere in the oceans fishing for bluefin tuna directly. Now, either way, the days of the British Tunny Club were over. And this is where beavers and bluefin share a sad story. For one reason or another, they both disappeared from their natural habitat. However, the sad part of the story is short-lived, and there's a more positive ending. And like beavers, bluefin tuna have returned to Cornwall. Part of my PhD is to try and figure out why. Now, the likelihood is that this is a fairly complicated scenario, so we should consider several different processes. Initially, bluefin tuna's huge size and this ability to keep themselves warm comes at an energetic cost. And bluefin have to eat between 2 and 20 kilos of fish every single day, depending on their size. Now, this means they're always looking for a meal. And they even have favourites, which are small fish like mackerel and sardines, which we find off our coast in abundance. And it could be that there are just a few more of these favourite food items in the waters of the United Kingdom, and this could result in us seeing a few more bluefin tuna. Now, alternatively, it could be that waters of the United Kingdom have become a more suitable habitat for bluefin tuna in recent years. Now, what I mean by this is that despite being able to keep themselves warm, bluefin tuna have a favourite temperature, which is about between 14 and 18 degrees centigrade. And as our oceans change, it might be that these temperatures are actually occurring off the British coasts more often, so we might see more bluefin as a result of that. Finally, it could simply be that there are a few more Atlantic bluefin tuna in the ocean, which is a nice thought to think. And bluefin have a really large range. What this means is essentially you'll find bluefin tuna in the Atlantic, from the eastern coast of the US, all the way to the coast of Europe and down to the coast of Africa, and then all the way from the polar seas down past the equator. And what tends to happen is that as the general population of bluefin tuna grows, their range expands, and as the general population of bluefin tuna shrinks, their range contracts with that. And this is something that we're working on right now to try and understand this. And if you'd like to find out a little bit more about our work on bluefin tuna, I'll pop a link in the video description. Also, one of the super cool tools that we're learning to use more to find out more about bluefin tuna are electronic tags, just like this one. And if you'd like to learn more about these, then you should check out the Earth Live lesson that the awesome Dr. Lucy Hawkes gave a couple of weeks ago, and I'll pop a link in the video description here. So, hopefully you now know a little bit more about beavers and bluefin tuna.
And we're both incredibly excited to see these animals here in the UK again. And if you're lucky enough and have a keen eye, then maybe you'll also be able to see one of them too.
And we've kind of wrapped up there, and I think that
we're just going to have a look and see if any of you have asked any questions. Okay, so Trevor, that beaver is massive. He's a big adult beaver. They can actually, I think Chris has said here, they can get up to about 30 kilos, which is huge. Okay, Tom, how big do tuna get? What's the biggest one that's been recorded?
I think the biggest one that's ever been caught with a rod and line is 100, well, I know it in pounds, so about 700 kilos, so 1,446 pounds. It's by a gentleman in Nova Scotia called Ken Fraser. He actually wrote a book about it, which is called Possessed, because he had to work so hard to actually catch it.
You've actually got a good question here from Matthew. Says, how does something so big get in such a small can?
Well, it gets cut up, of course, but you wouldn't find bluefin tuna in a can anymore. But it's a funny thing to say that bluefin are now caught and sold to the sushi sashimi markets. You'd never find them in a can. But back in the days of the Scarborough Tunny Club, they didn't know what to do with these huge fish. So they did, in fact, can bluefin tuna, which was something that, well, you wouldn't find now.
Okay, so I think these are lots of tuna questions, so I'm just going to interview Tom. So what happens to bluefin if they're caught in bycatch?
Well, if they're alive, then we release them. We ask people to release them because obviously it's much better to have bluefin alive than dead. If they're dead, then they tend to get reported to the Marine Management Organisation, and then we try and make use of them in scientific research by actually looking at them and seeing if there's anything we can learn from that individual fish.
And another one, how do you catch a bluefin tuna, and have you ever caught one?
Personally, I've never caught one. I've worked with people that do catch them, and the answer is with extreme difficulty. So licensed professionals go and do it in other parts of the world, and I kind of, it's with a rod and line. So if you imagine a rod like a telegraph pole and a reel like a winch, then you're going down the right avenue.
And then we've got a beaver question here, so I'll answer this and then go back to some more of Tom's tuna questions. So can we see your beaver films somewhere? Yes, they're all on my website. My website's ninaconstable.co.uk, and also on the Cornwall Wildlife Trust website. I think it's /Beaver Project, and some of them are also on the Facebook page, the Cornwall Beaver Project Facebook page.
So there's another beaver question here, which is Frankie, and she says, are there any more plans for beaver releases in the UK?
So I think so. There has actually just been one a few months ago on the Holmacott estate in not Exeter, on Exmoor, on a National Trust site. So that's a very recent one. But I think that also the Devon trial has just come to an end. That was a 5-year trial where they were running a similar thing where they were monitoring their ability to reduce flooding. That's come to an end, and the government have kind of assessed it, looked at it all, and they just said they just need a couple of months more data, and then they might actually be allowing beavers back, kind of not in enclosures, but we'll see. They haven't made that decision yet, but fingers crossed, because it would be amazing to have beavers back in our landscape.
There's another good one here from Alex. Do beavers have a favourite food or a favourite tree to cut down?
So willow is their favourite. I think that's the one that they'll kind of gravitate towards, and I'm not sure why. Chris Jones can probably tell you, but I would say that is an absolute favourite. And so some more tuna ones. Okay, how can we protect the bluefin to increase numbers?
Well, their protection fundamentally comes down to managing the commercial fisheries. So bluefin tuna are commercially fished to the tune of between 14 and 36,000 tonnes a year in the Atlantic. And actually, by scientists working with management organisations and all the different countries that tuna visit, which is a lot. If you imagine they're from the Americas all the way to Europe and then from polar seas down past the equator. By everyone working together and making sure that a sensible amount is caught every single year, which errs towards less rather than more, yes, it can be done.
We've got a random question here, but I think we're going to answer it. Out of topic, how tall are we? I'm 5'5".
I'm 6'3", which is why I'm sat in the chair.
Stand up and show. We thought we'd lose Tom's head.
No. This is our solution.
So I think that might be all. There might just be one more. No, I think that is all of the questions. Oh no, one more. Can you sustainably fish bluefin? Is there a sustainable way of catching them?
Again, it's like I just said, it's by scientists and all the policymakers across their range working together to ensure that not too many are caught and a sustainable amount are caught through the management process. And I think the key is collaboration and making it across their range and people working together and working for the good of the species rather than for the good of people's pockets, essentially.
And we've got another question here. That is, what is the respective life expectancy of beavers and tuna? Chris Jones, I'm going to ask you to answer that for beavers because I actually don't know and I'd be making that up, but Tom might know about tuna.
Typically, bluefin tuna would be somewhere between 15 and 25 years, with a 15-year-old tuna being something like they were used to catch off Scarborough, so those big fish you saw the Lorenzo Mitchell-Henry standing next to, and the world record would have been somewhere around sort of 22 to 25 years old. But in theory, they can even get to 30 years old, and if we're good enough to them and leave them alone, there might be some of those fish swimming around in the sea.
And on that note, I think that's all of your questions. And so I just want to say thank you so much for tuning into our live lesson. And if you do want to find out more about my work, you can follow me on Nina Constable Media or have a look at my website. And don't miss the next Earth Live that's today at 5 p.m.
We've also added some extra useful links in the description below. And yeah, hope you've enjoyed the lesson. And goodbye.
Bye. Thank you.